Hello! Welcome to the podcast, There Is No Spoon. This episode marks the beginning of the English version of my podcast. While it connects to the hero's journey, a concept introduced by Joseph Campbell and explored in depth in his brilliant book, The Hero with A Thousand Faces, I will shift focus to a different, yet related topic. The midlife crisis. The hero's journey, as an archetypal narrative, is arguably one of the most important to humanity. First of all, it is incredibly ancient. In some of the earliest myths, consider the Epic of Gilgamesh, we already encounter this structure. Secondly, it is deeply embedded in our Western culture. Some of the most popular modern universes, such as Star Wars, Harry Potter, and the Marvel Universe, heavily utilize this structure. George Lucas, the creator of the original Star Wars trilogy, famously attended Campbell's lectures, which significantly influenced his storytelling. Lastly, Carl Jung considered the hero's journey to be the primary pattern of personal development in the first half of life. There's so much to say about the hero's journey. Perhaps I'll return to the topic in a future episode. But for now, this season will focus on a slightly different, though related theme. If we think about the classic structure of the hero's journey, it usually ends where it began. The hero returns home, but the key transformation occurs not in the external world, even though fairy tales often conclude with rewards like half the kingdom. The true change happens within the hero. They leave their parental home as an adolescent and return as a fully formed adult, equipped with new knowledge, skills, and insights, having conquered their internal demons, or in psychological terms, integrated them. Most heroic stories end there. Harry Potter defeats Voldemort. Luke Skywalker becomes a Jedi, redeems his father, and destroys the Emperor. Fairy tale protagonists live happily ever after. But what happens next? As Jung noted, the hero's journey is a task for the first half of life. Psychologically, this means becoming an adult, adapting to adult life in society, finding one's place and purpose, building a family, and achieving professional success. Jordan Peterson, in his book 12 Rules for Life, might phrase it this way. The task of the first half of life is to identify appropriate dominance hierarchies and secure a position within them, preferably a higher one, of course. It's a challenging endeavor. Adapting to the modern world, with all its complexities and constraints, requires tremendous courage. Years of schooling, university, building a career, creating a family, mortgages, loans. The hero embarks on this journey in their youth, hoping to complete it by their 30s or 40s. But what happens after they return? What happens to the hero after the journey is over? How does one approach the psychology of the second half of life? This is a crucial and timely question, considering that the average human lifespan now far exceeds 30 to 40 years. Yet, paradoxically, while we have a good understanding of the hero's journey, we struggle to articulate what comes afterward. Many great stories end with the completion of the hero's quest. Harry Potter's story wraps up with a rushed epilogue. The less said about the Star Wars sequel trilogy, the better. And what of the lives of heroes after their remarkable feats? What became of Gilgamesh, Job, Heracles, Jason, Odysseus, and others? While there is literature on this topic, it pales in comparison to the volume dedicated to heroic journeys. One rare example is Michael Ende's The Never-Ending Story, particularly its second half. This is one of the few fairy tales where the hero's victorious return is only the midpoint of the narrative. This makes sense, given Ende's background in Thelema and the connections between analytical psychology and Thelema. Other examples include the second part of Goethe's Faust and certain myths, like the story of Oedipus, which also touch on themes relevant to the second half of life, though they often overlap with the hero's journey. It's worth noting that much of modern psychology, excluding Jungian and existential approaches, focuses heavily on the first half of life. This, in my view, is unfortunate. Dante was correct to begin his epic poem, which deals with the second half of life, with the lines, "Midway upon the journey of our life, I found myself within a forest dark, for the straightforward pathway had been lost." This brings us to the central theme of this season. We will explore the second half of life, often colloquially referred to as the midlife crisis. I believe this topic will be relevant to listeners of all ages. For those currently at this midpoint, this season might help map out the road ahead. For those approaching it, it could offer valuable preparation. And for those who have already traversed this stage, it may provide a new perspective on past events. What will we rely on this season? First and foremost, on authors who have written about this stage of life. In recent years, this topic has finally garnered attention in psychology, particularly within the Jungian tradition. Writers like James Hollis, Thomas More, and James Hillman discuss the midlife crisis from the perspective of analytical psychology, and their work will shape some of our episodes. Additionally, the previously mentioned myths, fairy tales, and stories, though few in number, warrant thoughtful analysis. Before wrapping up this introductory episode, I want to clarify my thoughts on the first half of life. From what I've said so far, it might seem like I downplay the impact of childhood and the first half of life on personality development. This is not the case. Undoubtedly, we are, in part, shaped by those who raised us. Behavioral patterns, traumas, unresolved complexes, all of these influence us in the present. Repeated mistakes and recurring narratives often have roots in the past. I don't believe anyone successfully navigates the trials of the first half of life unscathed. We all carry the burden of our past. But to what extent should our past define us? James Hollis often emphasizes that the central issue of midlife is outdated behavioral patterns learned in childhood, which no longer serve us and hinder our growth. While it's undeniable that we are influenced by early experiences, adulthood is marked by the ability to act in spite of circumstances, including our own history. This is what defines maturity. There's no need to endlessly revisit childhood in search of some elusive event, unless it directly impacts the present. Retrospective analysis is valuable only when it offers a path forward, and sometimes the burdens of the past must be addressed in the context of present challenges. Balancing these aspects is a theme we'll explore throughout this season. With this foundation laid, let's move forward into the journey of the second half of life. This was the podcast, There Is No Spoon. Until next time.